Hello mortals, I'm the Booktube Goddess, the #1 drag queen booktuber on YouTube. And yes, it is time for another tag video. I was tagged by Eric of Break Even Books to do the Wonder Tag, an original tag by Enchanted Reader. No, this tag is not about Wonder Woman. But rather about the album Wonder by Shawn Mendes.
I wonder, wouldn't it be nice to live inside a world that isn't black and white?
Now, I don't know anything about Shawn Mendes, except he's one of those really attractive guys that seems to pop up on my feed once in a while. I actually listened to a couple of the songs and they're fine. But anyway, let's get on to the tags.
The first question is Wonder. What is a book that you can't stop thinking about?
I picked The Wasp Factory, which I read last year for the Halloween trick or treat-a-thon, and it was such a disturbing, outrageous book that every once in a while it pops into my consciousness, and that's probably not a good thing. The story is about a young teen psychopath who's already murdered 3 children by the time he's a teenager. And yeah, it's a pretty disturbing book and something that is hard to get out of your mind. There are trigger warnings galore. If there's anything you're triggered by, don't read this book. But it is so well written and so disturbing.
Number 2, Hired. Name a sequel that was better than the original book.
Well, that's going to be a little hard for me because usually I like the first book and not the sequels more. But if I had to choose, I'm going to say The Chronicles of Narnia. There were a couple of sequels I liked better than The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe. Specifically, Voyage of the Dawn Treader and Silver Chair, and maybe even A Boy and His Horse.
Number 3, 24 Hours. What is a book that you can read in 24 hours?
Well, any of the Chronicles of Narnia. Mostly I'm just thinking of middle grade books because I don't usually try to read a book in 24 hours. But if I had to choose a book that wasn't a middle grade book, it would probably be The Soulless by Gail Carriger, which is a fantastic cyberpunk novel set in a Victorian England where there are werewolves and vampires, and the heroine, Alexis Terabody, has the ability to remove the powers of other supernatural creatures. She's called preternatural, or she's called a soulless. So that book is just such a fun, fast read.
For Teach Me How to Love, give me a book with a steamy romance.
Well, I agree with Eric that Red, White, and Royal Blue does have a very steamy gay romance. It's not my favorite book in the world, but thinking of books in the past that I've read, I'm thinking of Dahlgren by Samuel Delany. Has some very erotic, explicit sexual scenes, both gay and bisexual. Another book that just popped into my head was Chimera by John Barth. John Barth was a real popular author back in the day, and he wrote some very steamy novels.
Call My Friends. What is your best friend's favorite book?
Well, I'm thinking of my friend Sean, who's been my best friend since college, and he's also a reader, and I know that he loves the Stormlight Archives. I mean, he's just a real big fan. But I'm also remembering a book that both of us read that we just couldn't stop talking about, and that was Maya by Richard Adams, who you probably recognize as the author of Watership Down. But Maya is a book set in a fantasy setting that's kind of similar to, I don't know, ancient culture of Mesopotamia, and the heroine, whose name I forget, is basically this courtesan prostitute who rises to become a spiritual figure. It's a very strange book. Might be controversial now, but yeah, I remember both of us talking about that book so much back in the day.
So the next song in the album is Dream. I personally love this song. It's about a long distance relationship. I'm in a long distance relationship, which you guys have heard me say a million times, but this prompt is, what is a book with a long distance relationship?
Well, the one that came to mind is a book called The Millennium Series by Trudy Canavan, who is a fantastic Australian author who did the Black Magician series and White Priestess series. Anyway, basically there are two main characters, and I've never read a story where you have two main characters that almost never interact. One is Tyann, who is a sorcerer, and then Riel, who is actually also kind of a sorcerer. Now, the magic system in the Millennium series has magic as kind of this force that pervades everything that magicians can draw and turn into magic. Many worlds don't have a strong magic field around it. Therefore, magicians are either rare or non-existent. But magic can be generated by artistry. But anyway, Riel is also an artist who can create magic fields. It's a very interesting book. I have a lot of mixed feelings about it, but the magic system is really interesting, and we are talking about multiple worlds, so these characters are often not even on the same planet. So talk about long distance.
Song for No One. What is a character breakup that destroyed you?
Well, I'm not a big reader of romance books, but I thought of The Silver Medal Lover by Tanith Lee, who is a science fiction author who was really big in the 80s. I don't know if she's still around and she's still writing. But anyway, The Silver Medal Lover is about a 16-year-old girl, so this is probably considered a young adult these days. It wasn't written as a young adult novel, but the main character is 16 and she's in love with a robot. Basically, this novel is kind of prescient because I believe there are like a lot of diseases, especially sexual diseases. And if you want to experiment sexually, it's a lot safer to go the robot route. And there's some questions that arise about, is the Silver Medal Lover, I think his name is Silver, is he really in love with this girl, or is he just programmed to emulate love? And as you might imagine, things may not work out for the best. It's not the most uplifting story in the world, but it will stick with you.
So for Monster, who is your favorite villain?
Well, I've talked about this on my live streams before, but the book with a great anti-hero and villain is Empress by Karen Miller. Now, this is the first book of a trilogy. The first book is about the Empress, the evil Empress. She starts as a slave and she rises up, and she's very unlikable, but for some reason you still kind of root for her because she has such a tough life that you can kind of see where she's coming from. Now, this series is called the God Speaker series, and the first book is about the Empress, the evil Empress. The second book is The Riven Kingdom with, I think it's a princess or a queen who's sort of the good guy. And then the third book, Hammer of God, is about the battle between them. So the whole series is good, but especially that first book with that wonderful villain is a character who is quite memorable and certainly one of my favorite characters.
305. What was an unexpected romance between characters, whether you didn't see it coming or the plot of the story seemed like they just could never be together, almost like an enemies to lovers sort of thing?
Well, the book I picked for this is A Monster of Ellenthaven by Jennifer Giesbrecht. It's kind of a gothic Frankenstein, maybe a little bit of Lovecraft thrown in story about a monster who doesn't look like a monster, but he's very monstrous and supernatural, and he can rip people in two, that type of thing. And there is a sorcerer who may have summoned him or brought him to life. And the sorcerer is very effeminate and weak and frail. And I got this book for Shelve It or Shove It. And I didn't really know that much about it. And I certainly was caught off guard when these two characters started interacting in a very interesting way. And you're like, is there going to be a gay romance in this novel? And I had no idea it was coming. So check that book out. It's a horror novel, not for everyone, anti-hero novel, but fascinating all the same.
Always been you. What is a couple that is endgame or your favorite fictional OTP?
Now, I don't know what OTP stands for. Someone tell me in the comments, what is OTP? But okay, an ultimate endgame romance. I'm going to have to say Aristotle and Dante Discover the Secrets of the Universe by Benjamin Elir Sáenz. You've heard me talk about this before. It's a wonderful romance that starts as a friendship. And it's really almost the development of the friendship that is more important than any romance that might eventually come up, which makes it, I think, unique. There's certainly no love at first sight or even lust at first sight.
For the song Piece of You, what is a book that you would never ever lend out?
Well, I honestly cannot think of any book I would not lend out. I almost always lend out books if someone's interested in them, and now I mostly get ebooks, so it doesn't even come up. But no, I can't think of a book that I would never lend out.
Look Up at the Stars, a book set on another planet or in another world.
There are so many to choose from, but I'm going to go ahead and go with a classic science fiction, Ringworld by Larry Niven. Now, Ringworld is I guess you'd call it a hard science fiction novel, and the concept was these ancient aliens created basically a ring, artificial ring around a sun. And then there's another ring within the ring that is sectioned in black strips that emulates day and night. So as the inner ring turns, it creates day and night across the entire ring world, which is huge. And this is part of Larry Niven's known space. And if you don't know what that is, it's basically every novel that he wrote is part of this big universe known as known space. So this is a great introduction to Larry Niven. Has some of my favorite alien species, one of whom is the puppet masters, which is they're like two-headed ostriches that have, and the brain is in the body, and then the two heads are just like appendages. But they've evolved from a very cowardly creature, like fight or flight. They were all flight. You've just got to read Larry Niven if you're interested in science fiction. Fantastic world building, fantastic aliens, and he could spin a pretty good yarn.
And the last and final prompt is Can't Imagine. What is a book that you cannot live without?
Well, I guess I haven't said this in a while, but it's probably Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings is the only book I've read multiple times. It has some nostalgia for me. I started reading it very young, and it's been sort of my go-to book when I just really need to escape. So, Lord of the Rings, J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, looking at these prompts, I think they're really geared more for romance. And when I think of a romance booktuber, I think of Jess from her channel, From Me to You. She is a wonderful booktuber. If you don't know her, check her out. And Jess, you are tagged. Next, I'm going to tag Nick, the Jaded Book Burner. He's really new to BookTube. Please check him out. He's also on Twitter, and I believe he's also a writer. And finally, I'm going to tag CJ from CJ Reads. I just found this booktuber. She has such a wonderful energy and personality. I want to know what she thinks of these prompts. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and ring the bell and do all that stuff. And until we meet again, may all the books you read be blessed.